Hey, so well, good afternoon, everybody. Really appreciate you all joining us today. I did see some familiar names and some friends of mine, and so if this is a catalyst that helps some of us reconnect, that would be awesome as well. So we're going to talk about an outcomes-based approach, and we're going to let you understand what that means and think about how this could be applied to maximize the value of your technology. So again, my name is Tim Coley with Doctums. I'm going to go through some housekeeping kind of things real quick and get to our agenda, and then we'll kind of get this going. So first of all, we'll just ask you to stay muted until we have some discussion time later in the session. We do encourage you, if you want to post comments in chat or questions in chat, my teammate, Chris, we can engage with you, or you all can engage with each other. And so I know you're multitaskers. And so if you have comments, we would just welcome you to do that. And then we'll also have a discussion time that we can let you come off mute and let you speak and see what ideas you have. So we'll try, I know it's not very two-way and very engaging. We'll try to have a piece of that in a few minutes. So here's our session today. We're going to talk about this idea of an outcomes-based approach. It might be what you think, and there might be some things that you haven't thought of. We're going to understand the outcomes-based approach by kind of comparing it to our more conventional process-based approach, and we'll think about those cultures. We're going to talk about ways to apply it, and we'll give you a short case study. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion. I do have kind of introduction. We want to define some terms and talk about some things. And so I'll just ask you to kind of hang there with me for a few minutes as we kind of set the context for this. And so again, by way of introduction, my name is Tim Coley. I live over in North Carolina. So my background is I worked for 26 years for colleges and universities. I worked in student services. About half of those years were at private institutions, one in Georgia and one in North Carolina. Both of them went on and became HES Consortium members, by the way. I eventually served as a vice president, so I got used to being on the cabinet and engaging with the board and presenting to the board. And so I feel like I have a good foundation for understanding kind of your general culture at a private institution. I became a consultant 13 years ago. A management consultant. Again, I'm not from the IT office, but I did work a lot with technology planning and technology governance. So I worked very closely with CIOs for a number of years. One of the things that was one of my kind of formally stated objectives was to help CIOs either get a seat on the cabinet or keep that seat on the cabinet. So we talked a lot about being that strategic partner and being that kind of leader that your other partners at the institution said, we need this person on the cabinet. We gotta keep this person going on. All right, that's more than enough than you want to know about me. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Doctums. So we're a team of experienced professionals. We like to say seasoned professionals. My teammates are like me. They're experienced practitioners. They work for colleges, and then they became a consultant. We come from a variety of functional areas. A lot of our folks are from the IT world. Some of our folks were CIOs and went on to become consultants. We serve all types of institutions in the United States, and we also have a strong presence in Latin America. We want to be serving you as strategic advisors. We like working with leaders who are thinking about the bigger picture or being strategic, using technology in a strategic fashion. We think it's the expertise of our consultants that makes us different. Some of the principles I'm going to be talking with you about today will kind of give you an idea of how we have maybe a little bit different approach to some of the traditional things. All right. So by way of introduction and by way of context, I'm going to talk about three common challenges. I think they'll be common for you. These may not be your most pressing kind of on fire issues, but I think they're really relevant. And also these speak to being that kind of strategic leader. And so let me kind of go through these one at a time. As we talk about these, I want you to be thinking, you're probably already there, but I want you to be thinking about what's my role in helping my institution kind of face this challenge. And so we'll get into this. The first one is thinking about enrollment patterns. You've probably heard that term of the enrollment cliff and some of the issues around what's happening, particularly in the United States with recent high school graduates. And the demographics is pretty clear that along about 2025 and for that next decade, we're going to see a significant drop in many states and many regions around the United States. It'll be the actual number of high school graduates, and it'll also be maybe those students that are college ready and prepared for college. So this might be a challenge for your institution. My experience at private schools, we were always concerned about enrollment. We were always, all of us were keeping an eye on our incoming class and how that was going. We knew that if we lost students, that could have a direct impact on our operating budgets. We also knew that if we lost a certain number of students, it could begin to have an impact on our staffing patterns. So we were pretty sensitive and felt like we're all working to help bring in the students and take care of the students and keep the students. So I want you to think about what your role might be. Will your institution, will they change the way they're recruiting? Will they change the target audiences? How will technology play a role in that? What will your role be to help technology be an effective tool as you face some enrollment challenges? All right, second one, thinking about employee retention, right? Most schools I talk to since the pandemic talk about they have opening positions, they're short staffed. Higher education has not been immune from the great resignation that we hear in kind of all professional positions. A recent study, it's the College and University Personnel Association, showed that over half of employees are somewhat or kind of moderately interested in looking for new employment. Over half the people that work at colleges may be interested in doing something else. I think the pandemic has played a role in that, right? Some of us got used to working at home and we're not sure if we want to be back in the office. And so, think about your team and your campus. Has your turnover been unusual during the pandemic? Is it something you're seeing consistently? I want you to think about how you help keep employees, keep them satisfied and keep them wanting to work at your institution or want to work on your team. And also think about how how will technology play a role in employee satisfaction? How can technology play a role in recruiting and selecting new employees? So again, this may be something that you're stepping up to help your institution face this challenge, right? This third one's a little different. I like talking about this. I think we don't talk about it often enough. This idea that public perception of value for higher education and maybe especially for private institutions, right? So it's kind of like this. People are fascinated with this question of, is college worth it? When you have a few moments, if you haven't noticed, just kind of Google that phrase, is college worth it? And you're going to see just tons and tons of opinion pieces and essays. There's people try to make a science around it, like rising tuition costs has kind of outpaced normal inflation. There's the staggering levels of debt that college students have that outweighs all other credit card debt. How much will the earning power be, right? If my identical twin, if I go to college and my twin doesn't, my twin starts working and earning some money. Now I'm in school for 4 years or 5 years, and I earn my degree, and then I'm starting to get in the workforce. Like, how long does it take me to catch up, and will I ever surpass? And there's just a lot of conflicting data there. So I want you to think about, how does your institution kind of communicate that this is the value of our degree? This is what it means to get a degree from our institution, and what's that value? Maybe some of it's tangible, maybe some of it's intangible. What kind of data and information help tell that story? How does technology help us tell that story well? What's your role in helping your institution kind of face that. I know these are kind of high level things, but this is what we want that strategic partner, strategic leader to be thinking about, these kind of things. And you'll see how this, hopefully you'll see how this ties together. All right. One of the things we want to talk about is digital transformation. And, it's kind of a buzzword, buzz phrase. I'm showing you EDUCAUSE's definition here. I think it's really about getting a competitive advantage. And that's something that Keith talked about, and we like to think about is, will technology help us level the playing field? And what kind of services and solutions and support can we offer to our students and staff and faculty? So it's really about the movement that's going on. It's changing your culture. It's people using technology in some new and exciting ways, really to give you that competitive advantage. And we want you to be thinking about, do we know where we want to go? And you probably do. And so if you do, are we communicating that well, that this is where we're going with technology, and these are some outcomes we're looking for. And we want this to help shape your decisions about technology. So we want to link this efforts for digital transformation. We want to kind of see how outcomes-based approach would fit with that. And then kind of the other bookend, if you will, to digital transformation is thinking about the integrative CIO. And this is one that I think many of us were working about, thinking about the role of the CIO and being a strategic leader, getting on the cabinet, those kind of things. And EDUCAUSE came in with this label of the integrative CIO, which I think is fine. It's really thinking about the leadership that's required to kind of optimize what our institution is doing with digital transformation. You can't have effective digital transformation without that strategic leadership that you all are providing for the CIO. So I just want to highlight that's how we're thinking of you and your role, is you're that integrative strategic partner. All right. I've seen just a couple of things in chat. I'm going to ask my teammate, Chris, if anybody is kind of an early chatter. And Chris is saying right now, he thinks we can just kind of keep on moving. So I'm going to just keep on going if that's okay. All right. So I'm going to kind of shift gears. That's the introduction. That's the context. We talked about some familiar concept of digital transformation and the integrative CIO, and maybe there's some things on the horizon or things impacting us now that are some common challenges. So now we want to start explaining what we mean by the outcomes-based approach. And so here I have kind of 5 key principles, and I'll just bring these up and just tell you briefly. I think these are intuitive, and I think these will make sense to you. The first thing I would say is we think about the constituent experience really very specifically, and we contrast that by, I've done a lot of business process work and process mapping, and very familiar with that, and as you all are. And we like to, instead of thinking about process steps that kind of fit on a Visio diagram, we like to think about journey mapping and constituent experience. So you'll hear that theme kind of come back over, that as we're going to be outcomes-based approach, this is an important piece of that. Obviously, we're thinking about outcomes, and here's a very kind of plain speaking about what we mean about outcomes. And I think you'll like this. We think about the difference you're making for people rather than maybe the task you did or the outputs. We think of, processes and then outputs and then getting to outcomes. And sometimes we really, it's important to have, you measure those outputs, and I don't mean to demean that, but we're thinking of it a different way. And the difference you're making for people, what are they learning? What are your students learning? How are they growing? How about your employees? What are they learning, and what's their satisfaction with work? So that's what we mean by outcomes. Third, we think about defining and measuring some priority initiatives, particularly those that we can link right to the desired outcomes. I kind of grew up in that period of assessment where we were kind of assessing and measuring everything. And I like to kind of contrast that with an idea of key performance indicators and performance measurement. And so we're thinking of it in those kind of lines, that you're focused and measuring those priority things that are going to help you improve. All right, fourth, we think about this alignment, that we're aligning, technology and the function of technology, but we're making sure that's aligned with the mission of the institution, that the experiences and the processes and the outcomes all are aligned with that institutional strategy. And then fifth, I want to talk about, we think about change management. I think about oftentimes when a technology solution is not optimized, it doesn't really get off the ground. Oftentimes it's we did not really build that user adoption of it. We didn't really generate the interest, and people felt like something was being done to them, maybe instead of with them or for them. So we think an important part of this outcomes-based approach is really thinking about how we can help build that user adoption. And so understanding their experiences and their journey, that's a big part of that as well. Thinking about the values that are involved and the value that technology can bring, thinking about the outcomes. So we're looking at ways to motivate folks as they help take advantage of technology. Most campuses I worked with the last 13 years, that's been a big issue, is we have sound technology and infrastructure, but we have some issues with getting folks to really optimize the use of it. So sometimes that value, the immediate value is, increased adoption and increase that users are doing good things with it. All right, those are some of the key principles. I'm going to move into this a little bit of a compare and contrast. And I don't really mean this to be that things are, bad and good and there's no polarity here and it's not as oppositional, but I do think it helps us kind of clarify and understand some of the nuances. So the differences I'll be poking at, I think, are some of the nuances in a different approach. So we really like this table to kind of help remind us of what we're about and what we're working on with an outcome-based approach. So first of all, it's kind of a fundamental shift in, the conventional process-based is thinking about how do we do this? How do we get there? How can technology help us and so forth? And we want to take, I think of it as we're taking a step back and we're saying, why are we wanting to go in this direction? Why is this technology going to be the best for us? And it's making sure that we understand those high-level goals, and we're going to link up to those. Oftentimes, we're based on best practices and what's leading in the industry. And again, that's not that that's bad. It's just we also like to think about, maybe you want to balance that by thinking about, now, what precisely are our strategic priorities? EDUCAUSE likes to remind us to think about those differentiating factors for our institutions, right? What are our priorities that make us distinctive? What are our priorities that might give us a competitive advantage? And let's think about technology in that framework versus, here's a technology that's rated as kind of best in class. We want to be results driven in an outcome-based approach, that we're thinking about where we're going and what's going to happen. And I'm big into planning. I've helped folks with a lot of plans. It's just a little bit different nuance there, that we're thinking about the results versus just checking a box that we're executing the plan. Again, I talked a little bit about, this is a different approach. We want to get to process steps, but we want to start with the human experience and the human journey. And we want to map that. And then we think it'll help us understand the process steps a little bit different way. I've done a lot of those business process reviews where we didn't really have everything aligned. And you all have done those as well. And that feeling sometimes when you say, I think we're going to be efficient and we're going to go and we're going faster, but are we really going in the right direction? So we want to make sure we're going in the right direction. And we think starting with experiences helps us do that. And then we'll work on the processes. Oftentimes in technology, right, we think about the functionality, and we want to think about the constituents and the different people. And we'll give you some examples and talk a little bit more about the variety of constituents Also, we'll talk about people in kind of a different way of thinking about, people, process, and technology. That's coming up in just another slide. So we also want to think about functionality. We're going to start with thinking about the different folks, the service providers and the service recipients, right? Efficiency and effectiveness. I just think of effectiveness that it's about quality. It's about doing things, doing those right things really well. And sometimes a process-based approach is, can we do it a little bit faster, a little bit quicker? Can we decrease the time on task, or can we decrease the time to completion? And that can be very important. But again, we start thinking about effectiveness and then find your efficiencies once you've kind of laid the groundwork to be effective. Outputs versus outcomes. I mentioned that earlier. We think don't stop with the outputs. Don't stop when you think we've provided this service or we've done this thing. I want you to think about, how did this make a difference for our constituents? What are those outcomes for those humans, right? I want you to think about meaningful information. I hear from leaders such as yourself how we're drowning in data, but we don't have a lot of meaningful information. So it's that kind of sense of, it's not enough to have great data. It's about how we are able to analyze it, to make sense of it, and put it within the context of what we want to do. Again, that kind of focus on the people versus, and particularly, I think, the recipients. Sometimes a process-based approach is we're kind of that inside-out thinking. We're thinking from the inside of what's going to happen, and we consider the service providers and the staff their constituents as well, but we want to balance that with some outside-in thinking along with that. I mentioned this before, the difference between what you do and the difference you make. Really, maybe if you only remember one thing about what did we talk about outcomes-based approach, I want you to keep that concept of mind. It's about the difference that we made, and what we did was important and helped us get there. But again, we don't stop at that. This is back to that integrative CIO, thinking about being a strategic partner. Absolutely, you're a service provider and you want to provide great service. I talked with a CIO just a couple of weeks ago, and this person talked about, I keep the lights on, I keep the trains running. I don't really get into the functional, and I don't really get into departments and what they are accomplishing. And that just did not resonate with me. I think you want to say, we want to make sure that people are using things well. And we want that strategic partner so that IT helps our departments and our academic folks and our administrative folks get the value of what they have. And so I hope that's kind of where you already are as you're thinking about, I'm a strategic leader, I'm a strategic partner. I don't just turn the lights on for folks and let them do what they want to do. All right. I want to think about, I kind of grew up on this model of people, process, and technology, very common. I did a little research, and it goes back to 1964. I was alive then, right? And so this is very common. Then it got, it's kind of about workforce development in general. And then it really seemed to fit with technology as well. So tell you some things that, if we're really honest, I think, and a little bit critical, and we think about this, I want you to see if you think this makes sense. Oftentimes when we use this model, the people are really the staff who are executing the process, the service providers, not the service recipients. That's typically who we're thinking about, in my experience. Then we think about technology decisions kind of based on those perceived needs, and we might not have the full understanding, but we're moving ahead with technology. A lot of CIOs say, yeah, that's kind of how we've done, and we want to kind of break out of that mold. It's interesting that technology is kind of driving this many times. Then we think about the processes and where these fit in and how they help you kind of optimize that technology, but they're kind of driven by, let's get the process that fits this particular solution. And then we think about the people, and, oftentimes that's kind of training them and orienting them. And, this is where we're going, and we want you to kind of come along with us. And so, again, I'm probably exaggerating some of the issues here, but this is the way it's basically unrolled in my experience. So we're going to contrast that and say, if we think about a new perspective, a more outcomes-based approach, I'll just show you how that's a little different. So when we think about people, we're thinking about the constituents, first of all, those service recipients and the folks who are served by the processes. And then we think about the service providers and the staff who are executing the processes. Then we think about the outcomes really help people align their work and their goals to the bigger picture. And this is something I think people want to feel like that their performance is directly linked to the organizational performance. And sometimes I've been, I worked in student affairs, and we understood what we were doing was important for student success and persistence and completion and so forth. But we really wanted to make sure that we could see ourselves and what our work is within the mission of the institution. And I think everybody wants a sense of that. And that's where I think it leads to that user adoption as well. All right. Then we think about processes are mapped and really support those experiences of the recipients and the people who are being served, and also those folks who are executing the processes. We want to make sure that their experiences are considered. And then we want to think about technology and how it's configured to support the processes that are based on the experiences. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes as an example about that. So I won't roll this back because there's an animation and so forth, but I just want you to think about this is kind of a new perspective for that familiar, conventional people, processes, and technology approach. All right. Chris is telling me that we're good. No one has any kind of burning questions. And so if it's okay, we'll just kind of keep moving on as well. And let's talk a little bit about applying the approach. And I'm going to give you a quick case study. So I know this is not the largest font, and this is a little bit harder to read. So I'll just kind of talk you through this. We've been working with an institution, and they're just a good example because they've been living in that process-based culture. They've gone through several years. And for some departments, it's been 7 years that they've been reviewing their business processes. They did not really do a good job stating the high-level outcomes and kind of where this is going. They did not get the constituent acceptance of ideas. So over the past few years, they haven't really gained any ground. They haven't had their changes become adopted. Their existing systems continue to be underutilized. And so they're just kind of reached that plateau, and we're trying to kind of shake that up for them a little bit. So we came in with our outcomes-based approach. Let's make sure that we can align all of this with strategic priorities. Let's talk about how all this is going and where we're headed, and let's make sure that people understand that. We did our constituent journey mapping process. We talked with a variety of constituents, and I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're working with an HR department. And so this kind of harkens back to, right, one of my common challenges was keeping and retaining your employees. And so this is an HR department. So we're talking to a variety of constituents. Some of them are the central staff in HR. We also talk to the hiring managers from a variety of different offices, right? When there's a position open, it's a hiring manager from that department is kind of typically who's managing that. And so we also talked with people who serve on selection committees. We talked with candidates, and we talked with candidates who were for faculty positions and staff positions and full-time positions and part-time positions and people who were internal candidates versus people who were external. So we talked to a variety of different constituents. It's just really qualitative research. And so I want to make sure, we're looking for themes. We're trying to understand their experience and what was frustrating with them or what was positive for them. And so we're applying technique to really discern what's happening in these situations. And then that really helped us kind of drive. These are things that if they're looking for technology to play a more impactful role, we were able to kind of take those experiences and themes and concepts we were starting from folks. And that really helped us build the factors and the requirements for a applicant tracking system is kind of where this headed. So we helped them think about the RFP process and what kind of features would be important. I don't think they would have understood those features without us helping them with the journey mapping and understanding the experiences. I think they would have continued to kind of struggle in that loop. So we're helping them with that RFP process. We've already been helping them with constituent buy-in, just with listening to people and talking with people, showing people that we wanted to understand kind of their particular journey. They had not been asked that before. And so this example, I think, just shows us that a lot of things came together with defining the outcomes, making sure those are communicated, making sure those are aligned, doing some journey mapping, understanding people's experiences, making sense out of that, thinking about how this would help shape the kind of tools they're going to need to make improvements. And so this one just happened to fit together with leading to a selection process. And I'll just tell you that as we think about generalizing that, some of the same principles with other kind of system selections. I've worked a lot with CRM solutions. And so I just want to contrast that a little bit more. The process-based approach as you're thinking about, selecting perhaps a new system. Again, that process-based approach is, what technology seems to fit our needs? What's the functionality that we need? How will we modify our process steps? And we're the service provider to make sure we do this well. And just the nuances with an outcome-based approach. Why are we doing this? Why are we selecting the system? What is it that this system will do that relates to our mission? How will this system help us improve our performance in our mission? What are some of the outcomes that we're trying to make happen here, particularly with people and people's experiences? And we want IT to be that strategic partner that helps us align all this together. I think similarly, as we think about system implementation and system optimization, right? The conventional process-based approach is how do we leverage this and how do we apply this? How do we make our processes more efficient? How can we provide services to get the best out of our system? And again, the nuances here with an outcome-based approach is, how do we optimize the value? What's the value to the institution? What's the value to individuals? What's the differences we're making with people's experiences? How can we help people improve their own performance and link their own performance to the organizational outcomes? How can we help promote that constituent buy-in that people feel like, right, this is something that's being done with me and for me, and it's going to help me. How is IT that strategic partner that really helps you align that with your future priorities? All right, so I will kind of back up and just say, we want to give you a case study briefly. We wanted to just talk about a little bit other kind of general applications here with system selection. We know you do a variety of things. Just want to give you some examples of where an outcome-based approach changes your perspective and the way you might think about some things. All right, so I'll just kind of summarize quickly the key points for an outcomes-based approach. We've got 6 things here. This provides direction for your digital transformation. You're not just doing technology for technology's sake, but you're doing it for that alignment with your priorities. This gives you better value from your technology projects. We think a lot of that value comes from user adoption and motivating and empowering users to do good things with the tools you're providing. We think this improves the quality of folks' experiences. This can lead to employee satisfaction. This can lead to their good work. We think this creates a consensus that's approving of change and not resistant to change, because I've been involved, I've been engaged. People are showing an interest in my experiences. People are showing how they want to build on that and apply technology that's going to work with me. This transforms IT, right? This puts you in a role of being a strategic partner. We're helping departments improve their performance. We're helping academics improve their work. And then we also think this really helps you with vendor management, in that, the more that you know, and the more that you shape, those requirements, if you're selecting a new system, or the more that you need from the functionality out of a system, that's going to just make you a better partner with vendors when you can say, we've got a pretty good idea of what we need a solution to do for us. All right, I want to just kind of summarize with kind of general takeaway points, and then we'll go into some discussion here. So just kind of a quick review, right? You're in the age of digital transformation. You may not use that buzzword on your campus. I'm sure it looks, it looks different on every campus. You're doing it your own way. It requires that strategic and integrative IT leadership, right? To advance. You're getting the value of your technology. You're leveling the playing field. You're thinking about how you're going to make it work for you. We see that the outcomes-based approach gives you just a different framework to think about how we, where processes come in for us. We're going to improve this framework and take it to a better solution. Processes are still important. We're just saying it doesn't stop there. Maybe it starts somewhere else. We're also promoting a different perspective on that familiar people, processes, technology triangle or three-legged stool. We want you to see that a different way. And then we want to give you some different practical applications, whether it's a solution selection or solution implementation or getting the value from how people engage, that we want to give you some practical applications for that.